Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary English teacher David Pollicutt to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector will observe one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune his practice and beef up his presentation. He then gets 2 weeks to take on the advice before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
I think that you should always remember what your strengths are as a teacher and play to them. And I think today possibly I forgot that.
With his final observation just weeks away, David's back to the classroom to put all the advice into action and raise his game.
It feels proper to be using novels. It gives them more of a sense of something concrete and something real. Putting themselves in the position of literary detectives and finding out about the various characters and how they all interconnect both to each other and to the plot.
So we need to find a new character though.
Yeah, look at for me. A Wormick, I think.
Wormick.
After some initial scepticism they had when they had this sort of dusty old book in their hands, I really feel that they've grown much more excited by it.
Where's he finding Pip? When he find him? Well, he met her somewhere, I don't know where.
Yeah, somewhere.
Look, really different for the other lessons, because finding the characters before we start the book is really good. Like, where is it? Trying to find it, rushing through the pages, and you've got that 10 minutes to find it. It's like, hurry up.
I will ask you now to go back into your little groups and for you all to actually look at your last character.
I think Ulrika's body language and her tonal advice to me is something that I've tried to work on. It's still something which, to be honest, feels a bit unnatural. But I'm not getting odd looks back from the students, and it does seem that the instructions do, I think, get across clearer.
Estella is told to break Pip's heart because Pip falls in love with Estella.
What can we think is going to develop between her and Pip?
Would it be the untaunted love that was on the balls? Like, he likes her, but she won't like him back?
This is the unrequited love. So I've had to move these. The unrequited love thing, which you weren't sure where it came from.
I don't really read books that much, but I want to read this book because it seems interesting.
Why do you think it's Joe?
Because in the description it says he's got a hair on his face and he don't look smartly dressed or anything.
Wonderful, Hayley.
We never really finish books, but this one feels like we're going to finish it because it's quite good and everything. I'm enjoying it.
In so much trouble.
David takes time to reflect with girlfriend Rachel on his progress so far.
They're getting it much more activity-based. That they can actually sort of take the bull by the horns and run with something, rather than me always having to bring it back to, Mr. Pollicutt at the front.
What you want as an English teacher is to see development of passion for literature in those which might normally not be particularly mad keen.
My queen.
We've invited Sabrina Broadbent to join David and help him team teach his next English lesson.
So, David, tell me a bit about how it's gone.
Well, the first thing was that as you recommended, I got the dusty books out of a dusty book cupboard, and they did some work on looking at a character in each group.
So what's the plan for today?
What I'm going to be doing is starting off by getting them to write the opening 2 paragraphs of chapter 9, using as many of these techniques as possible.
So it's going to be a bit of plot and a lot about the author's craft and the language and the linguistic features he uses. That's ambitious. Yeah, but I think that's good.
I think Dickens probably wouldn't start with "I felt so aggressive." So perhaps you might start, Chloe, with a little bit of description about precisely where he is and then going into where he's feeling.
You're writing as Pip, you're in the first person. Are you going to have him about to knock on the door of the forge? Well, he wouldn't knock, would he, necessarily? It's his home. Are you going to have his hand pushing the door open? Got a few things to decide. They're all set off brilliantly. I have a feeling, though, you know what's going to happen, that you're going to have to go around to every single one because they rely on you. One thing we could try is we could just say to them, right, do the first sentence, and then you say, OK, let's hear the sentence.
OK, when you finish your first sentence, That's when I want you to put your pens down. So, Ardit's going to kindly volunteer for us. Ardit.
The thud of my boots upon the cobbled floor kept reminding me of how thick they were, and the brushing of my hands to my sides reminded me of how coarse they were.
What do we think of that? I think that's fantastic. Why might you think that's good? Ashley?
He was referring back to what Estella said.
Yeah, that he had thick boots and that he had coarse hands. Great.
If people could help me, I couldn't see properly for crying. Everything was all a shimmer. But...
Come on, Lee, you want to follow that butt?
But I could feel my feet scraping against the hard floor.
Oh, excellent. Really
actually, not floor, because he's on the road. What shall I use instead of floor?
Ground.
Ground, exactly.
She really sort of pinned them down and gave them sort of incremental baby step targets so they can actually see exactly what they've done in a sentence.
Morning, Refair.
I suppose I'm confident because I think I've understood all the targets which both Claire, Sabrina and Ulrika have given to me. And I'm hopeful that I can build on the strengths that I already have, my relationship with the class, their enthusiasm for text, to bring out an outstanding lesson.
It's the day of David's final observation. Still time to act on Ulrika's advice.
So I'm also going to remove this barrier between myself and the children. It's a symbolic act, like the Berlin Wall coming down. No barriers to learning.
Claire Gillies is back, and it's crunch time. With all that expert advice and weeks of practice behind him,
Right, ladies and gents.
will David have made it? From good to outstanding?
What we're going to do in today's lesson, as you can see, is to continue to write a little bit more in the style of Dickens. And then in the second half of the lesson, we're going to think about ways in which we can actually read that aloud. Now, having read lots of your ones in my spare time, I realised that there were 3 devices in particular that we weren't using quite as much. The first device, spelling phonetically. I didn't know you were such a fat whale, is an example of phonetic spelling. Another one, very quickly. Fison?
Alright, let me let it. One noise coming. Avesta at you have it.
Yeah, okay. Nice effort. Right, so the first thing I want you to do, you did so well with just doing little bits last lesson. I'm just going to ask you to write the next sentence, please, of your 3rd paragraph, in which I'd like you to use some phonetic examples of dialogue. Just 2 minutes on this, I'm going to hear some, please.
It was very clear because I understand what I had to do, so it was easier for me to write on it.
The next device that I thought people weren't quite so hot on was the idea of using irony. As clear as mud and as enjoyable as root canal surgery. Continue with your dialogue and get Joe or Pip or whoever's speaking to use some irony there. Why don't you go back to the voice of the narrator? So using Pip as the person telling this.
When we wrote our paragraph, he asked us to do some devices, but what I couldn't do was after I finished one, I couldn't put it straight onto another.
Dickens was famous for the brilliant readings he gave in Britain and America. To prepare for a reading, he would mark the pages with prompts to himself. Using these words here, think how you would actually perform what you have written. Writing on your work, words in the margins or words next to the words that you're going to be stressing. If, for example, you think you might use pathos at some point, so you would try and say that line extremely miserably. Think how you would be performing this text if you were yourself Charles Dickens. That's one reason why you might speed up. You're trying to increase excitement, aren't you? If you think about music in a film, the music gets quicker when it's getting to an exciting part, and that's what you're doing with your voice. So if you've got any bit here with a bit of tension or a bit of excitement, you might quick on at that point. Daryl.
I'm not quite sure what I'm doing now.
So what we're doing is you're going to be reading this out in a moment.
The writing and trying to talk as if we are Charles Dickens was really hard, but at the same time, different and fun.
My small hand stroking my innocent legs as I begin to cry. The scene in front of me now become blurred. Mr. Pumblechook waddled behind me, snorting my name. Pip, boy, come here.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jessica. Comments, please, about Jessica. What do you know about some of the techniques that Jessica used when she was reading out then?
When she said, come here, she went, come here, you.
She certainly, she made her voice sound aggressively, and also she, come here, I wouldn't say come here to you, I say come here.
Yeah.
So what linguistic device was she also using?
So speaking phonetically.
She was speaking phonetically as well, so she's done so many devices there. What I'd like you to do now is just to fill in this little task about how much you've learned and what you've learned.
Before we were doing kind of easy stuff, and he's made it a bit more challenging so we understand more. He's just made it harder, but then it's easy at the same time where he's explained it well.
Thank you very much, CFS. Cheerio.
Well, David, thank you very much. It was great to come back and see another lesson. It was lovely the way you'd structured those two very clear, different sort of halves. But if I honestly reflect on the sort of total volume of learning and where they got to, they did a great deal of work. I don't feel the second half came off as well as the first half. And I think it would have been much more helpful if we'd had some examples before we'd started to work on our own text of what we really meant by speaking cheerfully, speaking with pathos.
With hindsight, I would have done some modelling in between it.
Yeah, then it would have made a nice, because when you did, just briefly, we laughed, we relaxed, and a bit more of that, and a bit more play on it, sort of in the middle, would have.
I think at that point I was panicking about getting through the work, so I thought, right, no time for messing around now. Again,
quite a heavy lesson, and one or two of them I think really found it almost too difficult. But it was really interesting when I was talking to some of them how many said, I'd much prefer it to be too hard than too easy. So if I reflect on the whole, there were, just like the time before, some really very good elements of the lesson. And the reason that it didn't make the outstanding category was the structure in the sense of breaking it up and the sort of perhaps overload of ideas that made that second half very difficult for them to absolutely clear, you know, what you wanted. But although this one lesson wasn't, I see no reason why in the future you won't be delivering some outstanding lessons. So thank you again for letting me share the lesson with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. But, you know, it's all about the journey. And the journey's been fantastic. You know, I would take on board so much of what's been said to me by various people. And although this lesson itself didn't go from good to outstanding, I think that I'm now equipped with all the tools that I need to deliver outstanding lessons in the future.